This episode covers novel therapeutic methods that are still being evaluated and are not considered first-line treatments. These methods are presented for educational and awareness purposes only and should not replace evidence-based clinical care or assessment. Always consult qualified healthcare professionals when making treatment decisions. Hello and welcome to the Minds on the Frontline Podcast. I'm Jeff Lassers, one of your hosts. I am a professional firefighter, paramedic, educator, and content creator. My co-host today is Mike Mattern, a firefighter, paramedic, and peer support team expert. Frontline work rarely causes immediate collapse. More often, it creates a slow, steady erosion that can be difficult to recognize while it is happening. Long shifts, chronic stress, disrupted sleep, and repeated exposure to high-stakes situations can gradually reset what feels normal. Over time, functioning while exhausted or emotionally worn down starts to feel acceptable. And an okay day feels like a success simply because it is not worse. This episode focuses on that gradual decline and why it so often goes unnoticed in frontline work. Joining us in the conversation is Cinnamon Reiheld, a trauma clinician with extensive experience working with first responders. She is known for her direct, practical approach and her ability to translate clinical concepts into guidance that first responders can actually apply in real life. Through her clinical work and the Copper Warrior program, Cinnamon focuses on helping first responders recognize early warning signs, interrupt unhealthy patterns, and rebuild stability before things worsen. Because Cinnamon is not licensed in Michigan and has no connection to our state system, she brings an unbiased third-party perspective. She has nothing to gain from referrals or local networks, which allows her to offer clear, no-nonsense insight into what responders should look for in a therapist, what to avoid, and what effective, culturally competent care should actually involve. Cinnamon is also the host of the After the Tones Drop podcast, a podcast for first responders that tackles mental health and wellness with candid, real-world conversations about how the job affects us and what actually helps. During this episode, we discuss how frontline workers slip into unhealthy patterns without realizing it, why those changes are easy to normalize, and which early warning signs should not be ignored. We also break down the red flags, green flags, and practical considerations when choosing a clinician who truly understands frontline work. This conversation is about awareness, early course correction, and making sure support shows up before the slope gets steeper. As a reminder, the therapies discussed in this episode are intended to help listeners understand the broader landscape of care. They are not first-line treatments and should not be pursued without proper clinical evaluation and guidance. If something feels off, the most important first step is to connect with appropriate, evidence-based clinical care. Minds on the Frontline is presented by the Frontline Strong Together 5 program. FST5 offers 24/7 mental health and crisis support for Michigan's first responders and their families. If you or someone else you know needs help, call 1-833-34-STRONG or visit fst5.org to learn more and explore our free training options for Michigan's frontline agencies. Wayne State University administers FST5 with grant funding from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Together, we're dedicated to strengthening the health, resilience, and well-being of Michigan's frontline community. Please follow us on social media and enjoy the show. Cinnamon, how are you?
I'm good. It's Friday, and that means my clinical week is done, and I only have 3 podcast episodes I'm recording today, and then I get to go get my stellate ganglion block shot.
Oh, sweet.
Awesome. Before I ask you what that is, why don't you give an introduction to who you are, what you do, and where you do it?
My name is Cinnamon. I live in Cincinnati. I own a mental health private practice that I opened in 2018 after working with the department after a line of duty death. And I realized that y'all have way more problems than that one particular event. And I had the luxury of spending 8 months in a firehouse. And I know that clinicians don't really get to do that. And I had felt like I was accepted. I really liked the population. It was working. So I quit my job and I opened up a private practice to serve exclusively first responders and their adult family members. And that was, like I said, 2018. By 2022, I had started the After the Tones Drop podcast because what we were seeing was that stigma was, still alive and well. And this provided a way that one, I could give my clients homework assignments. They would listen to an episode rather than taking up time in session to do psychoed. But also all the ones who were struggling but weren't ready to admit they were struggling could listen to, high level, very accomplished, beastie first responders and veterans acknowledge that they'd had problems. And maybe if they were hearing it from people that they would respect or that they know, then they would be more inclined to reach out themselves. And it seems to have worked.
That's awesome. Now, remind everybody where they can hear more from you on that.
Oh, sure. The podcast is called After the Tones Drop, and it releases every Wednesday at 4 a.m., just so it's there and ready for anyone getting off of night shift so they can listen on the drive home. It's on most places, but most people tend to listen to it on Apple or Spotify.
Right on. Well, good. Well, you're here to really walk us through cultural competency from the clinician aspect, but also telling first responders what they should be looking for in any type of clinical help. You being a therapist for first responders for many years, you get it. That's why we reached out to you. The other thing is, those watching the video episode see that map of that state down south. But since they won this year, it is Ohio. We'll call it the Ohio. That's about where I'll end it. But what's really nice about you is you've been doing this for longer than us when it comes to putting together a system and seeing the people. And we can get an outside perspective from you to help our first responders be like, hey, stay away from this type of clinician. Go towards this type of clinician or whatever that may be, because you don't have a stake in the game. You have way too many patients to take any from Michigan, that's for sure. So you're going to be a nice, honest look into that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm not licensed in Michigan, only Ohio and Kentucky. And it has definitely been a journey coming in. The fire service, they say, 100 years unimpeded by progress. Yep. And so being able to say, starting in 2017 and jumping in this, it's not like there was this big movement before that. I mean, you see the sputters, you see the off cases of, things starting in the 80s, 70s, 90s, whatever, but it really didn't start amping up until 2015 and after. So I've gotten to see how rapidly it's grown in that short period of time compared to the first 100 years, at least in the fire service. So I have seen different things that I'm like, yeah, let's keep building. This is a great idea. This is a collaborative effort. We want people in the game and generating new and better ideas. And there's also been people that have tried to take advantage of monetizing your mental health. And it is a new, fun way to say, hey, I can help you. I've never done your job. I've never lived in a household with a parent or a partner with a first responder, but by God, I can put coach on my name. And so, you kind of like gotta watch it. And so it's definitely been an interesting ride with you all.
Good.
To say the least.
Like you said, it's come a long way in the past, 10, 15 years. And one of the biggest things that's really come about is getting the word out there about those early signs to look for, right? We're putting out the information so that the coworkers can kind of start seeing these things and the people that they work with a lot sooner than we used to, because that knowledge is that power, What are some of those signs that the first responders, that very early signs, that they're kind of starting to slip into that unhealthy pattern?
So I don't know if we would call this a sign, but I want to start out by just this foundational level of what you are all trained to do to be very, very good at your job. In my space, we call that symptomatic. So there is right off the cuff, we have a misalignment. So that whole Boy Scouts motto, be prepared, where you all show up on a fire engine that has everything that you could possibly need for whatever the situation is. And you're always forward thinking and you're always planning and preparing for worst case scenario. Well, in my world, we call that hypervigilance, catastrophication, all of these things that we're like, whoa, this is what causes anxiety. This is what causes paranoia. So I think to just say right off the bat, we already know that while they're training you to do this in a contained way on the job, there's really no way to peel all of that off when you leave work and go home. So you're already starting to pick up on things. As far as like the first symptom that I see that gets normalized outside of that is chronic fatigue and lack of sleep. The one foundational thing for mental health, if you're not sleeping, I do not have a single trick up my sleeve that's going to be supportive if your answer to your sleep questions on a sleep assessment or a screening is, yeah, I don't sleep, but none of us do. And I'm like,
Right.
Great. It's kind of like if you said, I murdered someone, but everybody else murdered someone. So it's fine. Like, that's not how that works. So we've normalized some significant problems. And the first one is sleep, whether it's you're doing a 24-hour shift and you're running all night, if it's you're getting home after a day shift and you are laying awake and just ruminating, or if you're back and forth between day and night shift, or if you're just simply not sleeping on the circadian rhythm that our bodies were designed to do, which means we need to be asleep by 11. And then we get to sleep all the way until our body's like, it's time to poop. And then we get up and start going. And that's why we typically don't want to see first responders have trainings from 1 to 3. Like, there's actually scientific evidence, not just post lunch, I'm snoozy. That is actually when the body is ready to take its midday break and actually it wants to nap.
I'll be bringing that to the training captain.
Well,
Well, you get you sit around the table, and then they start doing this.
yep.
And like, all right, you guys ready to clean up? And then everybody finds a chair or a bed, right?
Yep.
And you get that hour in, and then you
Yep.
reconvene unless the tones go off, obviously. For those of you listening who don't understand that part, we do leave and go on the calls too. But given the opportunity, we do listen to that part of our circadian rhythm. And I tell people all the time, like, you need it. What if I'm up 3-4 times after midnight? You want me to get a couple sleep cycles in. And I also go to bed earlier than I used to when I was a rookie, right? So
Yeah.
it'd be like 10, 11, 12. You're watching a movie. Now you're lucky to keep me past 7:30 in the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. You're banking that sleep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everybody's we're banking for the what if down the road. It's one of those big things.
Yeah.
You know, we look at it and everybody's like, oh, well, you get to nap at work, but they don't see us up past midnight.
They see the fun part,
Yeah.
which is cool. So let me ask you this. Why do people brush off all of those things that you recognize as symptoms we call part of the job? Anxiety, hypervigilance, on all the time, buzzing through your ears, trying to keep up, and going, yeah, that's just how I act.
Well, I think there's definitely a part of the public safety works that y'all are in a fishbowl while the rest of us are living in the ocean. Like, you are just a fishbowl that was dropped into the ocean, and you're looking inside your fishbowl comparing, and you all sleep like shit. You all are hypervigilant. None of you want to put your back to the door in the diner. And that's inside that fishbowl, right? And if you watch somebody come into the job and then over the course of their career, how their friend circle gets smaller and smaller from the ocean side, and it ends up being like, I don't want to talk to those people because they ask silly questions at parties about what I've seen, etc. So I just end up hanging out with other first responders. And what we're missing is the rest of us in the ocean are trying to sleep 7 to 9 hours. We're going to bed at a reasonable time. We're doing all of these things that are actually typical. But if you live in that fishbowl, you're doing what's normal because you're not with the rest of us. You're just with each other. So why am I going to make it a big deal when the guy that is on the other side of the furniture from me and is sleeping in the next bunk is also up with me at 3 a.m. on the EMS unit? We don't make it a big deal because what do you guys do? You ball bust. If I start complaining, it's like, oh yeah, you're tired. Well, so are the rest of us. And so nobody says anything and it just gets normalized.
The badge of courage of how many calls I went on in 3 days, and I didn't go home for 5, and I kept picking up overtime. And
yes, I'm seeing less and less, but I do wellness checks and provide other wellness services for a lot of different area departments. And I had somebody come in for one department, was wearing a different department's uniform. He's like, oh, it's my part-time job and I only work until 6 p.m. there. So I'm coming here before I go to the next one. I've got several volunteer departments I work with, and part-time is a thing. There's a reason that you guys have 2 days off. It's to rest and recuperate, and you're still making a normal, like 40-ish hour week. But no, not you guys. You'd love to get like a part-time job, doing the job somewhere else. I'm going to be a contractor. I've got my own little side hustle, and I can, come in and do your floors or demo your drywall.
Or podcast.
Or podcast.
You could just, like, sleep. Or podcast, yes. Or you could sleep.
I worked last night. We're up.
I first thing I walked in the studio today and I go, yeah, we did 28 runs in 24 hours. I got 2 hours of sleep. It's like
we had a CPR like right before I got here.
Yeah.
And look at how you have done that so much. It looks like it's normal and your body is completely adapted. I had mentioned earlier the stellate ganglion block, and I'm going to use this as an example. One of my police officers was noticing that they couldn't come back down after calls. They were just stressed out about damn near every domain in their life. So personal, financial, all of it. And then they went and got the stellate ganglion block. And they came back and they said, I didn't realize how bad it was. Where I was, that constant state of elevation and activation, I didn't realize how bad it was. And then later that same day, I had another police officer come in and talk about getting it done. And again, I didn't realize how bad it is or how bad it was until I got this block, and it allowed me to, one, not escalate over trivial things, and two, actually come back down from that adrenaline dump after a call.
So you're saying this is a treatment for the type of people you described, all the symptoms. This is an available treatment. Yeah. Give us that quick overview. Yeah. So the indication is all the things we've talked about so far, and this is just one of many therapeutic options. And the words you used, if I can't spell it, it sounds dangerous. So give me the overview of what this thing is.
Okay, so one of the things that I've learned over the course of doing this is that you have to get creative and crafty, right? Historically, most people do talk therapy. Well, what I was finding is I would do talk therapy. We would do like what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, and people would be bought in by the end of the session, and then they would go out and they would not do what we talked about doing in the session. And then they would come back and they would self-beat up, and they couldn't understand why they weren't getting it. I'm like, okay, so you've got it logically, but we're working top down, right? Like intellectually head down. And so that really wasn't working. And it was kind of making things worse because now we're beating ourselves up because it's not working. So I started looking at what if we go bottom up? And what that looks like is my job gets a whole lot easier if we do a physiological intervention that addresses the nervous system injury before we even try talking. So one of the things that I do is called accelerated resolution therapy. It's a bilateral stimulation therapy, and it allows the individual to basically replicate and then manipulate REM sleep, because that's happening between hours 7 and 9, which you guys aren't getting to. So you're not likely to have REM sleep. And then even if you do have REM sleep, your body is not adrenaline free, which is what is supposed to be happening in REM sleep. So you can process these memories from the day in a emotion neutral environment. So if you think about somebody waking up from a nightmare with PTS, they're sweaty, they're rapidly breathing, it's shallow. Yeah, that's because they're full of adrenaline, and they're not going to be able to process that memory properly. So we do it while you're awake, and then we like act like a little marionette, and we pull those strings and we help the body de-escalate, and that addresses that nervous system injury. Two other interventions that I use. One is the stellate ganglion block. This is referred to now as the God shot. And that was a coined phrase by the Navy SEALs. And Dr. Eugene Lipov from Chicago, he figured out One, by using menopausal women treating hot flashes and Vietnam vets treating chronic pain, that it actually reduces PTS symptoms. And so now NYU is doing a study so they can put it out for the FDA and it can get approved and all of that. So it started out as like an off-label intervention, but basically they go 3 inches into your neck with a needle. They hit that basal ganglion and basically like fill it up with lidocaine. And what that does is that constant threat message that goes from your HPA axis, like your pituitary gland, your adrenal gland, all of that, up into your brain and to your amygdala saying, there's a threat, activate. It doesn't go past that basal ganglion anymore. So it doesn't get to the brain. When it is appropriate, it can happen, but then you can actually cut down rather than staying stuck up there.
It doesn't stop it completely. It doesn't sever the connection.
No.
It doesn't block it completely. Nope. It becomes more of a rev limiter, if you will. We're from Detroit, right. So we're going mechanical on this one.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
It's being used in like a lot of like Center of Excellence is using it.
Yeah, I've heard of it a number of times, but this is the best explanation we've actually gotten.
No, that's a good explanation.
So far. This has been amazing.
I spent a lot of time talking to Dr. Lipov about it, and he told me every time I was wrong. So I got the right answer. That was super fun. I've never had that happen. I told him one time, I've never had anyone come on my podcast and tell me I was wrong so many times, but I really appreciated it. So yes, I explain it all the time because I always send my clients to do that. We also have an FDA study going on here in Ohio for ETMS, which is electrotransmagnetic stimulation. And that is a treatment for OCD and a few other things. But again, they figured out that it helps with PTS. And so we have several locations in Ohio that are allowing first responders to do it for free. It's about a $5,000 treatment. They're doing it for free as part of that FDA study. So we can get insurance to pay for it as a frontline defense to PTS. So we've got all of these physiological interventions that make the treatment of therapy so much easier because I'm not constantly running up against that part of your brain that's like, yeah, but. Like, I get what you're saying, yeah, but. Because you guys work off of possibility, not probability, right? Like, it doesn't matter that, there may only be 10 fatal accidents on prom night across the country. You're not letting your daughter get into that hot rod that her 17-year-old boyfriend borrowed from his dad. You're like, that, no way, because it's not likely to happen, but it possibly could happen. And I've seen the devastation from it. And so we're just not even going to risk it.
Yep. Perfect example. Now, I wanted to kind of circle back a little bit. You talked about there's kind of 2 types of clinicians when it comes to first responders. You got the ones that know what's going on, and then you got the ones who try to monetize it. Obviously, you're one of the clinicians that knows how we work, operate, and you live in our world. Now, when someone reaches out for help, though, what should they expect from a clinician who truly understands first responders? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, the green lights.
The green light for me has historically been word of mouth. I don't advertise. Like, there's all the things that when you open up a private practice and hang a shingle that therapists or psychologists are encouraged to do. Like, register on psychologytoday.com. It's a directory. I don't do that because I end up with people that I have to turn down because that's not where you all are looking for a therapist. How you're finding them is going, hey, I'm having a little trouble and I was thinking about going to see someone. Do you have any suggestions? Or going into whatever your department has developed as far as a resource list. That to me is how you can find a culturally competent, good clinician. With that being said, there are a lot of people out there that will say, oh yeah, I've worked with first responders. And that may mean that they have worked with a first responder, but they may not be trauma therapists and they may not be culturally competent in these occupations. I've been a therapist for therapists and I've had clients, there's no way in hell I would ever encourage them to work with all of you because they have their own threshold and they are not necessarily equipped constitutionally to do this work. Same for you all. Not everybody is constitutionally equipped to do your job. And some people just can't handle that level of exposure. at this point, I'm like, oh, that's the third time I've heard about that horrible, kind of situation. So definitely word of mouth, definitely has like more experience consistently working with first responders, not just, oh yeah, the one-off. I have done that before. Ask them if they've done ride-alongs, whether that's in a police cruiser or if that's in a medic unit or an engine. They need to have been out on the road watching what you do when you do it. That was probably one of the most important things for me to do. And I learned lessons that I didn't even know I needed to learn, or that would be lessons.
Yeah. And off hours too. None of this like 9 to 5. Like go there at 3 a.m.
Do it 24.
Yeah. I always say that the only thing I didn't do at a firehouse was sleep the entire night and wash my own clothes. So, I've been there at dinner time and, tones dropped and I'm all of a sudden stirring pasta, like to make sure that, dinner doesn't get ruined because everybody just, jumped on the truck. I've stayed up. I always left it no later than 11 p.m. because it just gets a little bit weird being, like, hey, what'd you do last night? I slept in a firehouse. What for? Work. Yeah, that starts to raise career.
Sure, that could depending on the people, it could certainly be. Yeah. There's an appropriate time and place for everything.
Yes, but definitely off hours, meals. Can I share a story about my very first ride along?
Please do.
Sure.
So I started doing this with a city. I got pulled as a trauma therapist by my organization to work with a particular city after they had a line of duty death in 2015. And I grew up in a community that doesn't even have a stoplight. We had a volunteer department. I don't have any relatives. Like, I didn't know anybody in the first responder world. I joke and say I was the person who tried to get that right-hand turn done before you guys caught up with me when your sirens were on. I was not great at pulling over. I've mended my ways. So I don't have any exposure. I'm thinking it never would have crossed my mind to worry about you people. Now, I don't really think about the victims as much as I think about you all on runs, but I'm working in this station and I go on my first ride along and it is literally less than 3 blocks away from the station that I'm at. I don't even know what I hopped into. I was probably in the medic unit at that point. And we get to this house, an old lady has called and needs a lift assist, right? Super common. Unfortunately, when we arrived there, front door was locked. She was alone and we couldn't get in. And so we went in a back window, which there we found boxes and boxes and boxes. So hoarding situation, you have to get your way through. Finally, I'll get in and one of the guys, asks if, she wants to make a sandwich or if she wants him to make her a sandwich. He's in her fridge. They ask where her granddaughter is. They know this woman, the granddaughter, is supposed to be the caretaker, but she also has a job. She is not there. The place smells like urine because she lives in that lazy boy and she just doesn't have what she needs. My first thought was, as a social worker, the Agency on Aging, they're like, this isn't severe enough. And then, of course, I went to go judge the granddaughter who was supposed to be there. And I'm like, okay, well, if she doesn't have the insurance or financial ability to have additional support, girl's got to go make some money. Like, this was just a shitty situation and there were no bad people.
That's what happens. And that's what breaks you down eventually, is to recognize there's no bad guys. Bad guys are a made up thing.
It's just
and there are bad guys. I don't want to say like that.
It's just a shitty hand that you're dealt. You know what I mean? And there's nothing you can.
Yeah. Your like instinctual thing is to, 1, find the bad guy and find the blame where the fault is, and then 2, to fix it. And neither of those things could happen. And there were definitely runs where I know the jokes come after, right? Those dark jokes. This didn't even register for a joke threshold.
No, that's so common to see somebody living in their last days of life in squalor, like that, where an agency wouldn't define it as such, but we all know as humans it sucks and there's nothing you can do. And if you get too overinvested, even your administrators are like, dog, we can't do anything for them. We're at the end of it. And now you're reaching for strands that you can't help in an industry that you decided to help. And now you feel dejected, and then do that 15 times. Now you stop giving a shit. And now you're like, you want a sandwich? You know what else you can do? How's it feel to want?
Right. Yeah. And walking away from that as a civilian, going, this isn't even anywhere near the kind of call that somebody would feel justified to be like, that was a hard one for me. If I've not grown up in that kind of environment, and that's the first time I'm seeing it, and I don't have an answer, like it takes your breath away is what it does. And then you're realizing, no wonder you all are effed up, right? Like you have to get okay with that to get back on a rig.
When we have people come ride with us on the stuff that doesn't really even tip our needle, you realize how almost desensitized you've become to a lot of that stuff, to where that's just my Monday at work, you know, and but to outsiders, exactly. Mm-hmm. It's that desensitizing to these situations that really kind of mess you up. You start shutting stuff down.
And now it's not reacting when you need it to.
Yes.
It's not a selective thing.
Yes.
And your family sees it. You start making jokes at things. And people are like, man, are you okay? Like, yeah. Just trying to bring up the mood.
Yeah. You don't have like highs and you don't have lows. You almost stay at this constant.
You try. It's your body trying to say, well, if we can't maintain these spikes, I'm just going to leave you into this level area where your words can be intense, but the way you react to it and how you address it isn't.
Yes.
Like, oh, that sucks. Yeah. You just keep it moving.
I'll throw out a different version of that. Is I see the way the body is designed, you're supposed to have a thing and your fight or flight system activates, and then the thing ends and you come back down. You guys are doing this, and then you finally get to the point where you're like, screw it, I'm just staying up here.
Yeah.
So there is a desensitization to things like that, but then there's a heightened activation of things that piss you off, like your irritability, your short fuse. It's like
you mean all the things that go away after I see a guy in retirement who's been gone at least a year, who tells me exactly what you said disappears.
Yes.
Here's what they may or may not be telling you. They're all having very similar dreams, and that is that they are in the firehouse unprepared.
Yeah, no, and they're being very open about that. I want to say
they can't find their gear.
All the things.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they're worried, and then it takes 6 months. And I had a chief. He worked 41 years. He's like, after 7 months, I just felt weird, and I realized that's called being relaxed. It's like, oh my God.
And it is such a struggle that it literally shows up in your dreams as your body starts to de-escalate and you start living more and more in rest and digest in that parasympathetic nervous system. Your body is like, holy shit, wait a minute, what are we doing? Like, this is dangerous. We've got to be like on our toes. And how does it show up? Our worst nightmare. We can't find our shit after the toes drop, and we can't get on a truck prepared, and everybody's yelling at us, and somebody is like probably dying because of us.
After the tones drop. Nice drop in there.
Nice drop. All right, so Cinnamon, we talked a lot about, we touched on a few of the therapies, the clinical things you can do specifically, and we talked about the type of clinical provider to kind of look for. But when I find a clinical provider, it's not like I go there and give me one of the basal ganglion poker thingies. You don't ask for that, right? You're asking for the right type of clinician to kind of diagnose or at least give you an idea of what's going on and clinical options. So help me understand, or help everybody else listening understand what to expect, what that looks like when you start therapy, basically.
Sure. So we talked a little bit about like how to find the culturally competent clinician versus somebody who has had a one-off or whatever. Even among the culturally competent clinicians, I want to be very clear, you got to find the one that works for you. I am very aware I am not everybody's cup of tea. You know, I came from a blue collar working family. I know how important money is. So I'm not going to screw around and keep you here forever. I want to get you in and get you out and get you ready to be able to take on the rest of your life. You know where to find me if something comes up, right? But what happens with that is you got to be mindful. Are you ready for something like that? Because I know there's a woman down here in Northern Kentucky. Her name is Jo Terry, and she is a widow of a former assistant chief who retired and then died by suicide not too long after that. And Jo and I came into this world about at the same time in 2017. I talk about her like she's the spider that connects all of the first responders and all of the providers, and then we all work together. And if somebody says, Jo, I need somebody who will talk to me like you do, She's like, go to Cinnamon, because I don't pull punches. I'm brutally compassionate. I'm honest. I'm going to call you on stuff. And to me, that is doing you a favor, so you don't have to spend so much time trying to like figure it out. That isn't going to work for everybody. So I think being able to find somebody that is a good fit for you is what comes even after the culturally competent, and then everybody's going to do it a little bit different behind that closed door. But first, I need to hear what's going on. Second, I need to come up with a plan that I can tell you about how we're going to address this. And the one thing that I've learned about you all is you want to know the why. Like, you don't want to spend a lot of time in the why because you just want to go fix it. But to me, it makes so much more sense to help you understand what's happening in your brain and your body and your nervous system. So it doesn't just feel like you're messed up or you're broken or you're crazy, because this is actually a physical ailment that, because of the way that it presents, got put over on our side of the physical mental health line. But we've learned we have got to collaborate. So I want you to know what's happening in your brain and body. And I want to be able to use interventions that are going to work. And in my experience, doing the somatic interventions first, where we can start to heal that nervous system injury, make it so much easier. And I can then start talking to you about reframing certain things and how they look, because the way you all build up that defense over time, when we start talking about distorted thinking, it's usually out of self-protection. And it's like, if you saw what I saw, you think the way that I think. As a clinician, you have to know that. And so I think there's a few steps. The one is I better be able to tell you what I think we need to do to address your issue. Like, it's not you showing up week after week and telling me, what your cow is, the crisis of the week. Like, life is going to go on, but we can't get distracted with that, because the problem existed before this one thing. And usually this one thing every week is just a manifestation of the big thing that brought you in. And if we can't get sidetracked. So I don't want to say it this way, but I'm going to say it this way. If you've got a lazy clinician who just is like, well, how has your week been? And then you talk about it and then they give you some feedback. Don't pay for that shit. Call a friend.
Right, because they didn't pick up on the last thing that you just did. Yeah. Has been some through therapy. We'll go, how are you? And then my therapist will go, so I want to touch on, and like she has almost like a lesson plan she's got to hit.
Let's circle back to what we talked about last week.
You're right. Like picking up, like this is where you're at in your algorithm.
Yep.
And I appreciate that, because I'll go in like, I don't want to do it. But like the thoughtfulness of that preparation and knowing and looking at her notes and all of that, you can tell. And I've been in those other ones where I'm like, this is just not working. We're not getting anywhere. And that's where I think people struggle is like, go to a therapy session once and they give them just the what's bothering you this week. There's no backstory. There's no nothing. And you, like you said, what are we doing here?
Yes. And I tell people all the time in session, if all you want to do is come and vent, please don't waste your money to do it with me. Right? Like if you just want somebody to agree with you, or if you're like, he answered the phone during this thing, and your friend's like, oh my God, he did not. And yes, he did. Okay. That's what a friend does. What Cinnamon's going to do. Why was it a problem that he answered his phone? Like, I want you to articulate things so you can hear what you have to say. And I want you to be able to recognize like those interruptions so you can start doing it yourself. Because me co-signing on your bullshit, I don't know, this is a university-based thing. You may have to bleep me out a few times.
No, you're fine.
No, you'd be surprised. A lot of them are more like you. I think
Yeah.
more clinicians, the smarter they are, they tend to be more realistic because they're not trying to paint a picture of how things should be. They're painting them as they are. And life is messy. It's not super censored.
Well, we also don't like the clinical talk. We like somebody who talks.
I like a clinical mind that
Yes.
talks like me.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and that's part of, up until I worked with first responders, my primary clientele had been human sex trafficking survivors. There's a lot more tiptoeing and sensitivity And I felt like I held my tongue a lot and like banged my head up against the wall a lot. So once I got with the first responders and I realized how thick your skull was and how fast or how deeply I could knock to get it in there, it felt way more organic for my personality to be like, why did you think that was going to be okay? Like, what part of you thought that that was going to go over well with your wife? So when we start sessions, I'm like, okay, this is what the plan was for this session. Tell me if there's anything else on your list. I will write it down. I'll manage the time, make sure we get to it. Because part of my job is making sure that it's not just 1 hour of complaining. And then you can tell everybody, well, I'm in therapy. Like, therapy is not what helps you. What helps you is taking what you learn in therapy and going and applying it the other however many hours there are in a week. I can tell you all kinds of things, but if the only time this is ever crossing your mind is during that 60-minute session, you're not doing any, like, now you're just performing.
Yeah, the therapy is the check-in points of, like, you've been working out all week. How we doing? What's it look like? How you feel? It's just like going to physical therapy. I told you to do this thing 7 times every day. Did you do it? It's the same concept. And like you said, I like how you phrase it. It's a nervous system injury that we're trying to heal, and depends on where is it injured, how is it injured, what's going to fix it, what's their personality, how did we get here? Then you're looking at modalities to really tap into resetting that system. I love that. It makes it so much more simple, I think, for our brains to comprehend.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's dumbs it down for us.
That distills.
Yes. We've had awesome conversation with you today, right? And
yeah.
So I want to wrap it up with this just final question. What's one thing that you want first responders to take away from this conversation today?
I would say that the one thing that I feel like could work in a multitude of ways is getting the sleep issue as close to normal as possible. If that looks like putting in place a, we call it sleep hygiene, which now I like have a tick every time I hear that phrase, but getting into a routine so your body knows when you start to do those things, it now has that muscle memory of, oh, we're shutting down. And so whether that looks like, napping during the day, or if you're, law enforcement working day shift, so you actually get to sleep at home at night. I've got all these different strategies that I help people build up that protocol, because without getting sleep, it doesn't matter how much you work out, how much you talk to a therapist, even your level of exposure. A non-first responder that doesn't get all the exposure that you guys do to the traumatic events, but just doesn't sleep like you, they will have poor mental health. It's not exclusive to you. So if you are not sleeping and your brain and your body are not getting that reset every night, then it's basically like the cleaning crew isn't coming and all the trash is starting to overflow out of the trash can that is your body and brain. And then we call that resilience, because you guys get up and go to work another day. But really what that is just simply pushing through.
Or put on the smile and go play with the kids, or take them to school, or do whatever and go through the normal life and mow the lawn and say hi to the neighbor. And the whole time you're kind of half struggling and half paying attention to life.
You're counting down the minutes till you could go to bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cinnamon, this has been an amazing conversation. We're going to do a lot more on sleep, too, because that's an underserved set of things to practice very well that have such a huge impact on your life. Eating and sleeping is such a big deal. A third of your day, you're supposed to be doing one of those.
Right?
Well, thank you very much,
Thanks
Cinnamon.
for coming.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Minds on the Frontline podcast. We have more great content coming out soon. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn. And make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you, and have a great day.